In April of 2003, my mom moved into her current home, which is one of those 55 and older places. And her next door neighbor was this woman named Joyce. Joyce happened to be Jewish, and she and my mom became very good friends. And actually, I sort of became very friendly with her too, because anytime Joyce ran into an issue, she needed help with something. Um, if I was around, I would go over and I would take care of whatever the issue was for her. And so Joyce ended up talking about me to her family, and so sort of everyone came to know each other. Well, one day Joyce's daughter was visiting her, and she needed something. Joyce needed something at my mother's house, so she sent her daughter to go get it. So her daughter came over and talked with my mom for a little bit and got whatever it was she needed, and then went back to her mom's home. When she was there, she said, "Who is that rabbi in the picture hanging in Sheila's hallway that was next to Brian?" So this was the picture that she saw. Her mother said, "Dear, that was not a rabbi, that's the Pope." Everyone had a really good laugh at sort of what happened there. But I think in certain ways that talks about sort of our expectations. I mean, the last thing that her daughter was thinking was that Brian would be in a picture with the Pope. I mean, that's not the first sort of thought that came to her mind. And again, that comes out of the context of her own life. I mean, what she saw was a yarmulke, and so she immediately put it in the context of her life, which would be a rabbi. And let's be honest, we all sort of fall into that trap in our own lives of, there's a context and we have a context we come out of, and we kind of try to fit everything into that. The problem is we kind of try to do that with God too. We sort of have an idea of who God should be and how God should act and how God should think. And so when God doesn't meet sort of our expectations, we get very confused. We kind of try to figure out why things aren't the way we know they're supposed to be. God is supposed to meet our way of thinking, not the other way around. But the reality is, God doesn't always meet our expectations. God doesn't always fit into the context of the boxes we create. God is greater than that. And that's what can be so hard in our relationship with God. That's why it can be so hard to find Him in our life. Why it can be so hard to hear His voice as He's speaking to us. Because the reality is, God is always in our life. God is always talking to us. We just don't always hear or listen well to what He's trying to say. We don't always have the eyes of faith that allow us to see the reality of what it is God is doing. Because God doesn't fit the context. And so it doesn't seem to work. So what does that mean? Well, the reality is God's not changing. God is who God is. And God has taught us what we need to know in the scriptures, through the church, through our experiences that we have of Him, through the sacraments, all of these different ways that God is trying to help us to understand who He is. Because the reality is, we're never going to really discover ourselves until we really discover God. Which means we have to let go of our preconceived notions. We have to let go of our sense of context. And we have to be willing to be radically challenged, because that's the reality of Christian life. Christian life is a radical challenge. It's a radical conversion. It's a radical change of life. And if we're not willing to take that radical change, that radical conversion, that radical challenge, then we're never really going to be able to fully embrace our faith. Because again, God is not going to change. So that calls us to. God bless.